Hello and welcome to the Anomaly Project, The Agenda, the show where we look ahead to our upcoming episode. I'm Marcus Lowth, and joining me, like he does every week, is a legend that is Steve Mera. Now, Steve, this week's show, it's going to be an absolute belter again. We'll be speaking with Graham Phillips. We'll be stepping into the paranormal world, the ancient world. Should be really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Graham's got his hand in a few different pots, be it the paranormal, a bit of the supernatural, ancient mysteries, and you kind of do though, don't you? Because the more you start researching, you end up drifting into other areas because there's little connections between them. And I find it all fascinating that those particular subjects. But I know he's been at this quite a while and he covers quite a number of different sections there.
Yeah, he does. He's a really thorough researcher and investigator. But I mean, one thing I'd like to get his thoughts on right off the bat is one of the subject of his recent book, Strange Fate. Now, not so much a subject matter, but he spoke a lot in that book about synchronicities. And he was saying, things would happen that would point him and his fellow author Jodie Russell in the right direction. Silly things that, you just couldn't explain. It was almost like there was an otherworldly force guiding them. And we spoke about this before, so it's almost refreshing to hear it from somebody else as
It
well.
really is. Yeah, there's a lot of people that have it. I mean, sometimes you have to pop the question and they go, oh, yeah. Because sometimes it's usually not at the forefront of mind. But yeah, it seemed to go, strangely enough, hand in hand when dealing with investigating phenomena.
Yeah.
And it's been referred to as many different things. I mean, I remember Robert Bigelow, who did the investigations at Skinwalker Ranch and stuff afterwards, and a number of NIDS teams as well, not only reported hitchhiker type phenomena, but they reference things such as multiple serendipities.
Right.
And in a sense, you kind of, oh, okay, all right, I kind of know what you mean. You're talking about things of really strange coincidences and
Yeah.
enough to recognize there's a pattern. And when you recognize that pattern, you kind of realize, this isn't quite normal. I've had them myself, and many other people have. When investigating phenomena, you do get strange things that happen. And not just that, anybody that's involved in this subject might experience these strange coincidences about opportunities, doors that open, or you're talking or you're thinking about something that night, and then the next day something pops up where, oh, I'm kind of doing something on it. It's just those sort of things. That is seems to be some type of mechanism, some intelligence that seems to do this. And it's like a manipulation of the reality we're in. You can literally go that far. It's so strange.
Yeah, no, it really is. And quite often I find, yeah, and I'm sure you'll agree that you don't always recognize that this is happening at the time. It's sort of thing that you look back on in retrospect, And
It
so
is.
if
Yeah,
you really
I've
kind
had a
of,
lot.
yeah, and if you really concentrated back and back and back, you'd probably be surprised how many of these coincidental events
There's
occur.
a lot. There's so many and so profound ones as well. And I remember some years back, I think I was doing some research for a TV show, and it was Philip Schofield.
All right.
And this information came forward, and somebody else doing research as well. And it was for a TV show called One in a Million.
All right. Yeah.
I don't know if you remember it, but and they wasn't going to put this in because I thought, well, it's more than one in a million of a coincidence. I mean, very short stories that a guy who's working in a business building, he's leaving. I don't know if it's an accountancy film or something like that, but he's leaving to go home, and he tells the secretary who's still there working, give me a ring when you knock off, so I know what time to log you out that you've finished.
Right. Okay. Right.
So she says, no problem. I'm nearly finished now. I'll lock up when I'm done, and I'll give you a ring. She said, no problem. So he goes and he drives home, and he gets home, and his wife, unbeknown to him, had bought a little puppy or dog or something. So he's had his dinner, his tea, and he decides for the very first time, okay, I'll just take the dog around the block, just a
Right.
short little trip. So he does, and he's taking the dog around the block. And as he's passing a phone box, it's ringing. And he stops and he looks around, there's nobody around. So he picks up the phone and he's just about to say to somebody, you're ringing a phone box, when the secretary says, oh, I'm just letting you know I'm knocking off. And he's like, well, you're ringing a phone box. She said, what do you mean? She said, well, I'm walking a dog. She said, I didn't know you had a dog. Well, the wife got one today. I didn't know. And I'm just walking around the block, and the telephone box when I passed rang, and I just looked around, couldn't
Wow.
see anybody. I picked it up. It was you. And she went, how weird. She said, hang on a second. So what she'd done is, because she had a phone number wrote down for him,
Right.
next to it was an account number. And she'd accidentally dialed the account number, which was that phone he was passing at that time with the dog, which he wouldn't normally have had. And I got to say, that's got to be more than one in a million, buddy.
That's
It's just
absolutely mind
crazy, that
blowing.
one.
Yeah, that is absolutely mind blowing.
That is cosmic jester stuff.
Yeah, and again, I mean, that's the kind of thing I think we should be asking Matt Graham's thoughts on. Is there something behind this? And if so, what is it, first of all? And I know we can't necessarily get to the bottom of that, but why? Why does it care so much about wanting to influence us?
It's
It's
really
that in
strange.
itself.
I know you're right, and I can only assume, I mean, it's only an assumption that when we get heavily involved in the subject, like Graham and many others have, is that we kind of catch the eye of
Mm,
the phenomena, and it can deliver things in a way which are strange, cosmic jester type coincidences, synchronicities,
mm,
just so profound that it's like it's done in a purpose for you to go, ah, that's not normal. And
yeah,
as soon as you do that, they kind of let off a little bit. But it seems like there's some type of intelligence. It's like it's monitoring. It is so weird. We don't really know. But if you were to talk to 100 researchers and investigators that have been doing this for quite some time,
mm.
they'll probably all say, yes, oh, yeah, we get strange coincidences, synchronicities.
Yeah, I would imagine it would. I mean, again, it reminds me of Barry Fitzgerald and the influence that voice in the ear. What's intuition? What is it? Is it from
What
within or does it come from outside?
We
It
don't
really
know.
is.
It's like the influence. Yeah, it could be an external an intelligence that's guiding us, or I mean, maybe we are manipulators subtly to the point where, oh, I've just had a great idea, but well, where did that idea come from?
Yeah, it really
You've
makes you
got
think
to
that. Yeah,
question everything,
it
really.
does. It makes
It,
you question, like you say, what are my own thoughts? Are my own thoughts my own thoughts? It really is
we
quite a rabbit hole.
don't really know, and this is what's so strange about it. But I know Graham's been involved in paranormal
Yeah,
investigation as well, which is good because paranormal investigations over the years has got better. I mean, it was very stagnant at one time. It
yeah,
was basically just kind of going out and seeing if you could capture a photograph or video, and that was it. It was like that was the pinnacle point of the whole thing. But then, now it's kind of dealing with witnesses, dealing with people who have had traumatic experiences. There's a lot more is involved than just taking a photograph and a video. And there are some very good pieces of equipment. There's been some very dodgy ones in the past, to be honest with you,
yeah.
which people should stay away from. But there's some very good pieces of equipment now, which really does lend hand to kind of taking a scientific approach to paranormal investigation. And we are kind of learning a little bit more about that field of study now.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like you say, I think for some time, it was all about capturing that photograph, that piece of video footage, and I think there's more emphasis put on actually trying to get to the bottom of things now. Actually, what is actually going on, regardless if we don't ever get any photographic proof. If there's enough information for us to start putting the pieces together,
Absolutely, yeah.
and like you say, Graham's been doing this for like yourself for decades. And I know he also. He's experienced not just ghost activity or not just whatever. He's experienced quite the range: UFOs, orbs,
Yeah.
you know, ghost activity as well, strange coincidences. So, I'm sure that we'd have to get his view. Is there a connection amongst all this stuff? Because, we know how we feel
Right.
about it.
Oh, well, yeah, absolutely. We've made it very clear our views on this. But I think for others, I think if they've been long enough in the subject, they'll find the patterns
Yeah.
themselves. They'll start to realize it's only because someone's not shouting it from the rooftop that it's all the same phenomena in the sense of speaking, is that they'll kind of work it out themselves eventually. They can, and they'll question, they'll say, that's a bit strange. That why? What has a UFO got to do with the paranormal? Just
Yeah.
like the Blue Book officers years ago say, "Oh, Mrs. Brown, just keep away from that ghosty stuff. Just stick to the UFO facts, please." It was done then. And it's forced us into this mindset that that's UFOs.
Mhm.
That's paranormal, and the two don't mix. Well, that's not actually true. They do actually mix in many, many cases.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely correct. And yeah, so we'll have to speak to him about that because, as you say, I mean, there's just too much crossover, too much bleed. And I think that's very much the case as well with, with ancient mysteries and things of that nature because, there's a lot of people that start off in the paranormal, UFOs, who eventually find themselves looking at ancient mysteries because there is, again, those connections. So
Oh yeah,
it's
but
good to
you
get his
have to go
thoughts.
back. I think it's a matter of fact that you start to realize, okay, what's currently happening in the world in regarding phenomena. Yes, people seeing UFOs. Yes, people having paranormal experiences and other things. But then they question, eventually at some point, they're going to question, well, how long has this sort of stuff been going on for? And if you do follow that track, and it's a very purposeful question to ask, you're bound to at some point,
Mhm.
you're going to end up in the ancient times because this is how old this stuff is, maybe even older. We just don't know. We can only go off documented history, and we don't. That's not been happening all the time. And the thing is, once you get into ancient mysteries, you start to see an overlap between UFOs, the paranormal,
Mm.
and even things associated to biblical connotations, which is interesting.
Yeah, now I mean it's great that you bring that up because, as you say, I mean I think a lot of the biblical writings, will prove to be very important. Not so much what they're saying, but kind of what they're based on, how they've been twisted and blah blah blah. We've talked about this before, but Graham's also done a lot of work on the biblical side of things. The real Jesus, for example.
Mm.
Most importantly to us, I think, is a lot of the connections he's made to ancient Egypt, and how a lot of this stuff goes back to ancient Egypt. The Christianity, for example, is essentially
Yeah,
ancient wisdom, ancient Egyptian wisdom. So I
yeah.
should probably get his thoughts on that because I think a lot of things run through ancient Egypt, probably through to the Atlantean times as well. If
It
you
really
really
does.
went back.
It seeps through into current times with
Mm.
Christianity. There's Sumerian, Babylonian, Egyptian. It's all in there.
Yeah,
Symbolisms and even things that we might take so granted as like the Lord's Prayer, when in fact when we say Amen, it's Amun, which is Egyptian,
yeah,
you know. But the problem is it's buried in clear sight. It is just there.
yeah,
And because it's there, it's so ignored. It's so easily ignored, but it is there. And there's lots of associations to paranormal antics to what we might refer to as biblical artifacts. The spear of destiny,
yeah,
for
yeah,
an example. It was said to have been hunted out by the German forces. We said to have some type of power. And they make films and TV shows and things about this speculatively. But there are things like supposed to be like, wands, even, when we talk about witchcraft and Harry Potter and wands. Well, the wand comes from ancient times,
yeah, yeah,
associated to ancient wands and staffs and stuff, which apparently were given biblical energies, and things like that. There's lots of artifacts throughout time where it's been questionable to the point where we're even studying now about some of these things, including that Jesus, did was he a super being or was he just a man? And if he was a man, did he marry? Did he have children? Is there bloodline? And that's that. If you do follow that, that starts getting very, very interesting about, Egyptian, about Glastonbury, about the Renaissance in France, about many, many different places which are seemingly had a footprint to maybe Jesus moving around, and not just him, but people associated with him. And
yeah.
then, of course, your other artifacts, of power. Ark of the Covenant for being one of them. I know that Graham's looked into some of those things.
Yeah, I mean, he has. I mean, I would just the thing that fascinates me with all this, and particularly with ancient Egypt in mind, is there's been some researchers who have said, they've pointed out it's quite funny if the biblical writings are accurate and true that there's no mention to Egypt in any of those biblical writings. Like they've just purposely omitted that. And some of these same researchers have put forward that Jesus, rather than being a poor, destitute, shepherd's son, was actually probably a royal who was probably a pharaoh who had fled ancient Egypt, And whether that's true or not, it's compelling. But going to the Ark of the Covenant, though, that is particularly fascinating because you mentioned about the Germans, the Third Reich, in the 30s, hunting down relics. And we've mentioned this before, the guy Spielberg again. In
Yeah.
Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, he described the Ark of the Covenant as a device to talk to God.
Well,
And
that's
when you
how it was
break that
pretty much.
down,
Yeah, and that's how it was kind of
yeah,
described to. It was described to be a communication
it was,
device.
yeah.
But what's interesting is that the terminology of ark, is it means it's something to carry,
Yes.
like Noah's Ark. In other words, it was something to carry something in. Well, it is, but there are also references to Ark as in ARC, because
Yeah.
apparently the Ark of the Covenant was said to produce huge amounts of energy,
Yeah.
where it in fact even kill
Yeah. Yeah.
the people that were even carrying the damn thing. If you start do the research, there was a brotherhood of certain types of priests which had a certain type of rhesus negative blood, interestingly enough, which were said to be able to carry the ark without actually being killed. And it
Yeah.
was something to do with the blood. I don't know if that's true or not, but it fascinates me. But whatever the Ark of the Covenant is, it was much more than what we think, because they say it was the manufacture of the ark came from God. He gave the dimensions, the height, the
Mhm,
width, and
mhm.
how to build it. If it did, it would have weighed probably over 4.5, nearly 5,000 pounds. And the images that most people have are from stories and scriptures is that four people carried it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, they've got to be pretty strong people to carry 5,000 pounds between them, just
It
with
makes you,
four.
it does make you wonder because with the Ark of the Covenant as well, I mean, there's a few things I want to get in here actually. With the Ark of the Covenant, first of all, you were talking about the weight of it. I mean, if you look at the walls of Jericho story, circling the walls and then they collapse. There's a lot of people that were saying, well, I know it's like leaping in the dark here, but that's like sonar technology. That's what's brought them down. So if there is any truth to that, I'm not saying there is, but if there is, it's almost as if we're talking about, making something almost weightlessness. Like people have said, stones in the ancient world were made weightlessness and being able to move.
Well,
So
yeah. I
it's
mean,
something to at least contemplate.
well, you talk about monatomic here. You talk
Right.
about monatomic powder, and apparently some of the tests that was shown that when you put monatomic powder into, well, when you put gold into a special stone bowl, it's a special bowl because it can hold tremendous amounts of heat to be
Right.
able to smelt gold. When it had to go into an industrial oven to do this through an experiment, and I think this was done in Switzerland as well as another place. And according to the documentation, there was a flash of light that the gold, which was smelted, had literally changed its composition due to heat into a powder.
Hmm.
And it was a flash of light. But when they took the bowl out, which is a big heavy bowl, stone bowl,
Yeah. Yeah.
it like weighed nothing because of the powder that was in it.
Hmm.
And once they removed the powder from the bowl, it returned back to its normal weight value. And you think to yourself, well, where did the Ark of the Covenant come from? Well, it's supposed to have come from the top of Mount Horeb, not Mount Sinai, which is kind of a bit of a,
Right.
other side of the story. But the story connected to Mount Horeb is that there was an ancient smelting plant up there,
Right.
and
Yes.
apparently it was discovered by a very famous archaeologist called Petrie. And it was like an Egyptian temple in a sense, but not really on the borders of Egypt.
Hmm.
And yet it was this place where they'd smelt gold into monatomic. And yet it's supposed to be the same location where the ark was manufactured and brought down from there. So you think to yourself, that's a bit strange. Coincidence? Again? Who
Well,
knows?
I mean, what's funny about that as well, though, is like you say, there's those. I know exactly what you're referring to as well. I think it was Beckley Green wrote, but I'm not sure. But I know I've read a good bit about
Yeah, yeah,
that,
Tim.
and yeah, it's fascinating. But when you mentioned the connections to ancient Egypt, there were some researchers, and I think it's pretty well established actually in ancient Egyptian research that there was the Ark of the Covenant was kind of present there in ancient Egypt, not just one. There was
No,
several of them. And I
that's
mean,
right.
fast forward into the modern world, you've got it's in Ethiopia, it's in the hills of China. They all could very well be in those locations because there might be more than one.
There
It's
may be more than one, and he also may be replicas. And the problem
yeah,
is, how do you supposed to identify a replica? This is
yeah,
the problem. I mean, I don't think it's in the Church of Zion,
right,
which is in Ethiopia,
yeah,
because it's
yeah,
just like a tiny little church
it
and a
is.
little fence and one man guarding it. I just can't really imagine that. But it's said that nobody really knows where it is, but of course
Mm.
they'd say that, wouldn't they? I don't know if they've got it in some type of big warehouse like they did in the Spielberg movie, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it wouldn't put it past. It can't, because there are biblical references to these
Mm.
things. And if they are discovered, it's not because maybe that they hold great power, but it's the significance of the intent of how of owning it,
Yeah.
and it's the same for Vatican. They've got numerous artifacts.
Mm.
The blood of a saint that still pours apparently, and it's
Right.
100 years old. A hand of a saint, and this and all sorts of weird, strange things down there.
Yeah.
But with the Ark of the Covenant, it was said to be able to have the power to level armies,
Yeah.
and he used to apparently take it into battle. And it also, not only that, but it also somehow used to super nourish
Yeah.
your own army.
Mm.
Now it's interesting when you talk about nourishment here, because if it was said then originally that it was supposed to carry the breaking of all the stone tablets
Yeah.
in the ark, which had turned to dust, but then monatomic powder, dust, very similar. It might add to the why it might have been so easy to carry,
Mm.
considering the weight. But also, there's references in biblical documents and scriptures that Moses came down from the mountain. Well, he would have had the ark with him because he
Yeah.
apparently
True.
brought the ark down with him, according to scripture. And he went down there. The Israelites were there. They were worshipping a golden calf, which is a bit more like Moloch stuff.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
bit not good, and I don't blame. God was infuriated and wanted to smite Moses' brother.
Yeah.
Moses pleaded with him, "Please don't kill my brother. He does not know what he's doing." And then he nourished these Israelites with manna.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and it was described as a kind of white powder. And he said he fed them gold. Well, you can't feed them gold, not gold in a sense, but you could feed them monatomic powder, which is from gold in a sense. So, it starts to get really, really crazy, doesn't it? About are they all entangled, these stories? And is there some truth? There've got to be something there, element.
Yeah, I think absolutely right. I mean, and I think, with the Ark of the Covenant, you think about the Knights Templar there, and eventually the Knights Templar, although it wasn't as clear cut as this, but they kind of morphed into Freemasonry as they surfaced again. But what I find particularly interesting is just going back to whoever the real Jesus might have been, or even Jesus' followers, a lot of what he said, and a lot of I think, was it Lazarus when he took him into a cave again and he rose after 3 days. It's basically a Masonic ritual, which is
It
going
is
on. And
in
it's
a
almost like
cave.
this has been passed down right the way through the centuries. The Knights Templar discovered something or rediscovered something, and then that has again been fed all the way back. So now it's in the secret societies of today, and it's.
Yeah.
I don't mean to make it simplistic, but that's kind of seems like what's happened. What we're
It
looking at.
really does. It's a ritualistic practice in a cave again,
Yeah.
as many other times. It's been apparently successful around the world. Whatever the things are that they're actually dealing with, but the whole aspect of the Templars were, well, they were Crusaders initially, but I mean, of course, there's hierarchies. There's different levels, and some of the highest hierarchies were dispatched to find biblical artifacts or anything that would lean in their favor. And it was a matter of being utilized for the power of Christianity. However, some went in the wrong direction. Some started looking into more of the supernatural stuff,
Mm.
and were looking into ritualistic practices. Some of them got caught in Notre Dame and were burnt by the stake outside Notre Dame because they thought they were dealing with the devil, you know. There's lots of strange stories, but apparently, though, the mechanism for the empowerment with this, because as you say, it became Freemasonry,
Mm.
and the Masons was to represent it, symbolism, secret symbolism in architecture, which we can see around all over the world now.
Yeah, no, you're right. And again, I think what kind of ties all that up neatly is we know the Third Reich had I wouldn't say the origins in secret societies, but many members of the Third Reich were in secret societies.
Oh yeah.
So the fact that they're then going out and trying to legitimately hunt down these relics, it just kind of ties together really
They
quite
were very,
neatly.
very occult. Parts of it were very occult driven, especially the darker sides and the SS and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Even the reference of the swastika, but the swastika has come from ancient past. The swastika is associated to, divinity and spiritualism. That's
Mm.
what it means in
Yeah.
ancient past. Of course, it's got a bit of a bad rap now, as
Yeah,
you can imagine.
benign joke.
But even the Celts were using a mirrored version of the swastika in Celtic lore, and you can see symbolism of that around. But it's one of the most prominent symbols all over the planet in ancient times. It's in India, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And yet, you know what? It's got a bit of a bad rap now. But if you do the research, you think, hang on a second. Well, this ultimately represents divinity and spiritualism. So where are they going with this? Because they had connections with the Vril Society and all sorts of different things. So yeah, definitely had an occult tone to it, but definitely were going out all over the planet. These weren't little trips,
Oh,
all over the planet in hunt for biblical artifacts, and that's apparently was well documented.
yeah, I mean, you mentioned the Spear of Destiny, and that was one particular item which it's not proven, but some people are quite sure that they got that as well. Now, whether they did, I mean, who knows? But
Mm.
what is clear is that whatever they did get, if anything, at the end of the war, the Allied powers would have seized quite a lot of that stuff. And it's
Yeah.
quite funny that through Operation Paperclip and etc., how then the CIA and the FBI suddenly took an interest in ancient relics. It's almost like, again, it's just carrying on. It's
Well, I think there is empowerment to items. I mean, we know like we can get haunted items, don't we? Haunted certain things which seem to be attracted to certain phenomena around them. Is it really any different than empowered, biblically empowered? I mean, there's said to be biblical empowerment around the nails that apparently were driven through Christ's wrists, not palms, but wrists.
yeah,
So they say, so there's probably a lot, but where do you draw the line? You think to yourself, well, everything he touched, everything that he was associated with, is it a biblical artifact? And does it have empowerment? I think things that you might consider that, that God had a hand in them or some intelligence,
yeah.
then yes, absolutely. I think there's definitely something. But is it giving empowerment through the belief? Is if 100 people believe just a ballpoint pen can craft some great mysterialisms, then it might
Yeah.
because it's thought over
Yeah,
matter,
I
isn't
think I
it?
think
So,
belief's a powerful thing, really. And like you say, I mean, let's be honest. Certainly until the last century, possibly, humans have been held in control by belief. So
absolutely. And no
it's
more than Christianity has, to be honest
no,
with you. Yeah.
exactly, absolutely right. Look, Steve, it's going to be a fascinating show. I can't wait to
Really is, yeah. I'm looking forward to listening to how Graham's gone on and more so about the connections, how he's jumped from one lover to, sometimes it's not so much a jump that there's connections. I like to find out a bit more. What's he been involved in, and what's led him across from starting in this area
yeah.
and ending in that area. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, it really will because, like you say, it's always a journey, and there's always something. And you don't always see it at the time, but it's
Always.
going to be a great chat. Steve, thanks for joining me as
Yeah,
always, and thank you guys for joining us. Make sure you tune in on Friday, 24th of July, and that show goes at 9 p.m. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and make sure you check out the Anomaly Project podcast.com for further articles and information. Until next time, goodbye and take care.